Welcome, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there. I'm Rachel O'Mara, your moderator today for the session with leadership transformation from private to private equity, PE. And for those of you who don't know me and Scott, I will be doing a fireside chat style presentation today. So we've got a few slides. We're going to spend the next half an hour diving into this world of private equity and how it really does differ from the private world. I am an executive leadership coach based out of San Francisco and also work with Sick Ventures Studio. We are a business development arm to help fund biotech startups. For me, I'd like to introduce now our speaker, Scott Bontempo. Scott is the founder and principal of Bontempo Advisory Services, human capital advisor and consultant to multiple private equity and hedge fund firms, primarily in the mid to small markets. He has worked in nearly every industry type in this type, and for 20 years, he's been doing this in the private equity space. This work has a focus on carve-outs, integrations, org redesign, founder transitions, executive comp, executive assessment, labor relations, as well as a wide range of business and human capital best practices to optimize investments. He also provides advice and counsel to CEOs and exec teams on sensitive matters. On the firm side, he conducts high-level internal firm work, including partner performance management, executive compensation, governance, and succession matters. You're clearly the person to talk about this, Scott. He has a unique perspective on human capital and change management in the PE space, having led the human capital practice at multiple firms. So first question to you, Scott, and welcome. You've worked on hundreds of transactions in this private equity space. So for our audience today, who might have limited exposure to the private equity space, what would you want them to know about the industry, its size, and how it operates?
Well, first, thanks, Rachel. I appreciate that very kind introduction, and hello, everyone out there. Well, look, I could take the whole time we have today to give you the full breadth and depth of the private equity world, but I think simply put, typically firms take money from institutional investors, some high net worth individuals, but let's just, for simplicity, a pension fund wants to diversify their investment portfolio. They take on a little bit higher risks. They give money to private equity firms to go out and invest that and get them higher returns. The firm will go out and typically buy a business or invest in a business, borrow some money from the banks to add to that, run it for a while, and then ultimately, hopefully, sell it for more than they paid for it and return a higher return to their initial investors, obviously taking some fees and some piece of the profit for themselves. I think the thing to understand is every private equity investment is bought to ultimately be sold. They may hold them shorter or longer periods, but they're going to be sold. So in kind of that's the macro summary. What I think is important to understand, there's just a little bit of data here I'll give you. And that is, there's 3,500 private equity firms operating today in the U.S. They're sitting on roughly $1 trillion of dry powder or uninvested dollars that they're looking to put to work. There's tens of thousands of companies out there, and I think interesting, at least, over 6% of the U.S. GDP is running through those companies today. So it's a big number in the grand scheme of things. But I think in where a lot of my work is done over the years is 85% of those companies invested in by private equity firms have under 500 employees. So we all read about the $15 billion big transaction, the Toshiba transaction this year. That makes the Wall Street Journal. But what I would tell you is there's an awful lot of small businesses out there and family businesses and private ones taking private equity money, some for the first time. And my guess is, regardless of where you sit in the country today listening to this, that you're within 5 or 6 miles of some private equity backed, services provider, manufacturer, you name it, out there in the industry. So, and firms are looking to with all that money to put to work, they're looking for creative ways to do it. And so, when the situation is right, I think you're going to see more and more people working, continuing to work in these relatively smaller businesses.
Gotcha. Thank you. And thanks for introducing us to some of these terms like dry powder. I think it's really important to kind of get the vernacular because it is a different beast. Are there unique characteristics that are different from how public companies are governed?
Certainly, well, every firm does it their own way, right? There's no absolute playbook. There are those who invest in high growth businesses to, biotech all the way to hardcore manufacturing and everything in between. And some of them buy growth businesses and some of them buy things that might be struggling a little bit. But in the end, and this is the reason I really enjoy working in this space, is I really think this world is really business sort of distilled down to its essence. What I mean by that is the alignment between the investment firm itself and the management team is very easy to get. They're all working towards the same objective that they agree upon up front. We're going to grow the business from X to Y. We're going to, move our profit margins from, A to B over a period of time. It really sort of takes out the politics you see in some public companies, the competing interests that might be internal in large organizations, where here they're all working for the same thing. I always call it rowing in the same direction, right? We have an alignment of interests. We're going to hit this number, and we're going to win together. We're going to lose together. And I think finally the important part for me and why I like this world is you just don't have the quarterly reporting pressures that public companies have. And I think anybody who's worked in public companies over their career understands that sometimes companies do silly things 2 weeks before the end of the quarter to make a number. And you just don't see that. PE investors are trying to, what does it take to build a great company over time? And I'm not worried about the 31st of March because I have to hit a number when the bigger picture is a 3 or 4 year window. So I think that's a key idiosyncrasy of just the differences that I've seen over the years.
Yeah, I'm hearing there's not a structured playbook as rigid as and expected as in the public market. Makes
a little
sense.
Different.
Totally. So knowing all of that, what do you think are the key things that a founder or an entrepreneur, company executives, or any consultant should understand that a PE sponsor would be focused on? What do they need to be thinking about?
Yeah, I think this is really central to kind of what I want to get across to the group today. Whether you're a founder, an entrepreneur, an executive, a consultant, a coach, there's such a sort of shock to the system that can happen for first-time executives or first-time founders. Entrepreneurs may sell their business, take private equity money for the first time. So I give you a quick illustration. You have a founder. Let's call her Mary. She's got a specialized machine business. She started in a garage 15 years ago. She's grown it. She's been very successful. She's got, $50 million in revenue. She makes, it's profitable business, but she wants to grow it some more. She wants to, let's say, double it. She wants to make it a $100 million business. She needs capital. She needs to buy equipment. She's got to bring more people on board. If she goes to the bank, either won't loan her as much money as she thinks she needs, or the rates are not affordable. But she's got a good business. A private equity firm who's comfortable in that space sees it. They say, "Yep, we like her. We like where she's going. We like where they've been. Let's put some capital in this." And they buy, a given percentage of her business, say 80%, just for discussion purposes. And so they write her a check for $50 million. This is a really good day for Mary, right? In the business. But the backdrop to this, and this is where I see this just repeated over and over again, with rare exception, is the first time somebody takes private equity money or sells to a business, sells to a private equity firm, they really need to understand, be it Mary or anybody else, is that that check is not a gift. That check is she just entered into a really strong partnership, and understanding that seems so simplistic, but over and over again, I see people say, well, they took the check and then they forgot who the check came from. And they go off and think that tomorrow is going to be the same as yesterday in terms of how they run their business. And it's just not. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I see a lot of wasted ergs of energy about resisting those things. So I see it as there's really three key things that no matter who you are, what industry, who buys you or whatever, that's always going to be, they're going to be consistent across it. So it's really three things. It's communication, it's financial reporting, and it's talent. And so I want to spend a few minutes talking about each of those, and kind of how it manifests itself and how you may see this or be mindful of it as it pertains to your sort of interaction with firms. So let's talk about communication first. Mary, for 20 years, she's communicated in a couple ways, primarily down the organization as the leader to internally, and externally, to her customers, to perhaps some bankers, but primarily those are the kinds of communication, and she's been in charge of it. So if she wants to know something, she asks. If she wants to hear somebody to hear something, she tells them or communicates to them. Well, now she's going to have to communicate not just to the lead deal partner who led the transaction at the firm, but other people at the firm, her new board, and that is probably to be expected, right? Nobody, as Mary would expect that. But I think where the real frustration comes in is there's a bunch of other people at the firm, be they analysts, be they operations people, all who want information, all who want to be helpful, all who want to help improve the business and talk about it. And the very best owners, the very best CEOs and leaders run to that help. They take it. They don't take it as, hey, there's something wrong with your business. You get into this dichotomy of, wait a minute, you just wrote me a big check. I must be doing something right. So now why do you want to, crawl all through the minutia of my business? The best folks take it as a positive. It's sort of quote unquote free consulting, because again, your interests are aligned. You're all trying to get to the same objective. But human nature says people struggle with it, particularly founders who say they're used to being the final answer on everything at their business. And so anybody asking things sometimes comes across as an affront to them. So what I would suggest is transparency is super, super important to your, in general, in the way I think about this, but particularly to your private equity owners. And that includes what's working. And I think importantly, hey, this is what's not working. Or we're not going to hit this number like I thought we were going to hit. So, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Versus let's just keep the communication really close. Nobody talked to the PE guys but me. I can tell you that the red flags go up at private equity firm offices when the CEO, the leader of the organization, starts controlling information and telling their people not to talk to folks or to have it all come through me. Maybe is really the way they would say it. It's just not conducive, and I see it over and over again, and eventually it gets worked out, but usually it's unnecessarily painful. So the second area is financial reporting, and this may sound like a very dry topic, but PE firms want information the way they want it. They're not really, it's fine that you're operating on an elevated QuickBooks system, but that may not give them what they need. It may have given you as the owner or the leader what you needed, but put yourself in their shoes. At a firm, I got 10 or 12 or sometimes more companies I'm trying to look at their financials and oversee. And oh, by the way, I've been doing it this way for a a decade. So I've looked at 100 companies, and it all kind of looks this way, the way I look at the numbers for a given types of industries. So having some uniformity in reporting is a frequent request, and it tends to take a lot of time. This month we report this way. Well, you gave me 50 pages. I need 10 pages, and I want to see this data. Well, it's really hard for me to get that data out of my system. I understand. How can we help? What do you need? Okay, it gets incrementally better over time and eventually to get to a place, but usually it ends up upgrading some financial reporting system, not so much standardizing, but getting people what they need. And if I could give people advice on this, if you're contemplating, monetizing your business or taking money, look at your systems and say, is this really going to be sufficient moving forward, and thinking about the end user? Because sadly, what happens is you get 3 months into a new owner and you say, I need a new system. And the people who have to put the new system together are the same ones that are doing all the reporting for you during the day. So they're basically, you're really overtasking them. So an important area to look at, and one in which will reduce a lot of aggravation over time, because otherwise what happens is you get a lot of analysts, associates, super smart 29-year-olds calling your CFO and saying, I need this number, or you need to help me. I need to figure out what your line item profitability is on item 67 in your portfolio, and you can't get it. And everybody gets frustrated. So be planful about financial reporting, and also if you do need to make a change, just understand the why is pretty important. And I think the last one I would highlight for you is talent. It always comes up. It's not because I spent most of my career working in human capital work and decades in private equity, but the reality is, if you're taking money for the first time, you're coming out of a family business, a $50 million business. There's a combination of factors that are limiting to get you to that $100 million or whatever the objective is that you agree upon. And it goes in some sort of version of this. Everybody at your firm's at the largest job they've ever been in. So this is the biggest job they've ever had at your company. They just can't. They could get you to 50 million. They can't get you to 100 million. Or they're in one of two other things. They're in jobs that's just sort of got morphed into what they do today because you needed to do it. It was necessary and important at the time. Or, just candidly, they've got they're related in some way, or through marriage or sister-in-laws or parents in some way. They're in the business. And of all the issues I've talked about here, this is the most challenging to work through because it's emotional. Let's go back to Mary as an example. She grew this business with her sales leader for 10 years. And she'll struggle mightily with the fact that that person might not be able to get it from 50 to $100 million in that time frame that we need. What your PE partner, on the other hand, has seen 75 sales leaders in their career as a partner, and in 2 meetings they know that person can't get me where I need to go. They just know. And so navigating your way through this is challenging and delicate, but it's really one of the most important levers that's out there, because once you write the check, if you're a private equity person, if you paid the right amount of money for that business, the real lever you have left is the talent that runs it during the time you own it. And so good leaders from a private equity standpoint will focus on that. And if they get leadership right, they feel like they've de-risked their investment, they're going to make money, and everybody's going to win. So there's a big focus on getting this right and navigating your way through the emotion of that.
That's huge. Yeah. Thank you for really outlining that. Communication, financial reporting, and talent, all 3 of those huge levers for what to do differently and think about differently. And I could see all of us who are attending here thinking about this in different ways for potentially the people we work with, whether we're coaches or in a field where we might know someone as an executive in those areas, but huge and totally agree. I think as well, the talent is the most important, especially for leaders who've been leading solo and they need to grow their team and things like that too.
Yep.
So
Yep.
thank you for all of that. We've got about 4 minutes left. So really wrapping up here,
Yep.
what are your takeaways for all of us? What are some action items for us in the audience that we can implement some of these things or do some things differently based on what you've shared?
Yeah. So, what you see here is really sort of summarizes that for the sake of expediency here. Communication, it should be frequent, transparent. I would recommend to you that you agree on a communication cadence with your private equity partner. And you just got to accept the fact there's going to be lots of multiple points of contact up and down your organization, and it's all pointed in the right direction. You just got to come to grips with that. And, the old adage, bad news does not age well, applies here particularly. So, share the good, share the bad. On the financial side, like I said, people they're going to want to see things a certain way. Think about your system. Is it really robust? And the thing I didn't address earlier was just there's going to be some uncomfortable questions you're not used to answering in your prior either ownership or leadership standpoint. And they're not badly intentioned. They're just questions that people want to understand. And so just sort of, you probably learned something along the way too. And finally, on the talent side, my takeaway for the group would be is realize that some people who got you there aren't going to be able to get you where you're going. And the most important thing I leave you with on that is the last bullet point, which partner with your private equity team, prioritize your upgrades, and as much as it pains you, really think about how to be part of the solution and work your way forward. Be proactive, be flexible, be proactive. We know we can't change a whole bunch of jobs on the same day, but what's a priority and how do you work through that? I think that from a leadership standpoint, if you're on the private equity side of the equation, having a leader who talks to me, gives me the data that I need in a timely fashion, and kind of understands that talent's going to make us both this a profitable partnership is really key. I'd leave the group with that if you want to go action anything today.
Well said. In the chat here, we've got comments that agree with you that the talent is first and foremost super important, and consensus is these are big things. So thank you so much, Scott. Appreciate all your insights today. And if there's anything else, please put it into the chat. Otherwise, have a great rest of your conference. And anything else you'd like to add, Scott, in this last moment?
No, thank you, Rachel. Thank you to the audience, and happy to follow up with any of you if you like. So have a great rest of the conference. I look forward to it.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye now.